And if you see the person here that's it's by Surefly, if you just tap on her name, you can add her as a mod. Um,
Just
and
did.
it looks like you have a couple other people who are willing to do that, because
Yes.
we'll just ignore those people who don't love us.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for making time to chat. It's so good to finally get to connect with you. It's I've been following for. I was just saying. I think it's. I mean, we've both been on TikTok. I think you were on before me, but 2.5 years maybe.
Well, I think what was, yeah. So I think that, okay, if there's a couple other people that's inviting that you're in, that's being saying that they want to mod, but that's totally up to you. As long as we have a couple, we should be fine. So yes, I think you and I were one of the first to follow each other. When did you come on TikTok?
Wow.
Around COVID?
Yeah, it was in COVID 2020.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we came on the same time, because when you followed me,
Yeah.
I want to be honest with you. It surprised me,
Okay.
because I thought there's not going to be anybody churched who's going. It's making me emotional. Who will want me here,
Mm.
really?
Yeah.
And you followed me. You and Carrie Olson.
Yeah.
You too. Of course, you're young, and at first I'm like, oh, they're following me. What is this about? And so, because I had been in my little bubble with my interfaith, interspiritual seminary experience after deconstructing, which I basically did on my own, coming out into this forum, I thought, okay, I'm just going to get attacked by every Christian left, right, up, down. And there you're following me. And then not only that, you talked about me a couple times or shared a video. Wait a minute, I gotta reprocess this and understand that there are people out there who get it, that I'm not a threat to you. I actually, and it actually helped me on my journey as well, because I realized that I'm not anti-church.
Sure.
I'm anti-harming people by using fear-based theology
Totally.
and spiritual abuse and manipulation that causes religious trauma. And Brandon, no one can ever say that about you. So if sometimes I do feel like that people need to turn away from some of those experiences, but
Yeah.
if returning to church serves you, then do that. That's I don't encourage people. I don't proselytize for people to leave, and I don't. I let people choose what their spiritual journey looks like, and many of them return to
Totally.
places that you shepherd.
Well, yeah, and I mean, quite similar. My own spiritual journey, even as I've been within the confines of institutional Christianity, um, there have always been folks from kind of the interspiritual, interfaith perspective that have spoken into my life and, like, quote unquote, behind the scenes have helped me as I do work in a church, keep my own faith and keep my own sense of spiritual groundedness. And so finding you on TikTok, especially in that very, not that we're in a less strange season of life, but it was a very strange season of life in the midst of the pandemic. I was
Wow.
coming to the end of pastoring my community in San Diego at that time. And so just finding you and finding the community of folks that have risen up really encouraged me to not get burnt out and give up on this whole enterprise. And so yeah, I'm just grateful for your voice, your work, and so glad that we're in this space together, because though I think obviously we may speak and have a little bit of a different language in the way that we articulate the messages that we're articulating, like everything that you post, I'm resonating with and agreeing with,
Well,
and it's so
thank
helpful.
you. I was just talking over on my live with one of my mutuals, Beyond God and Religion. I don't know if you know who that person
Yeah.
is, but we were talking about how finding ourselves here, the important thing wasn't what we believe. It
Yep.
was more about understanding that in this season that we're in, it's so important to find like-minded, compassionate people who get that it's about rising above this theology where you think that you have the right to come into people's lives like we're having,
Yeah.
and the way people want to slam and somehow think that that's being Jesus like,
Yeah.
that somehow leaving hate-filled comments, that somehow your and my existence here in this space is threatening to them, to the point that they think that showing themselves in this way is somehow sanctifying their presence in the eyes of the divine,
Yeah.
or whatever your word for God is. That still astounds me to this day, that there are people who think that somehow that is a valid spiritual choice. And I haven't seen, I've been talking to all my mutuals. I'm not seeing a lot of people's comments or content right now because the algorithm's just crazy.
Yeah.
But the last video I saw, one of the last videos I saw of you, was you really took it on the chin when you went onto somebody's podcast. And what really got, I was ready to come out with both. I'm ready to come out with both Dukes fighting on that one. But what I love about it is that you turned it into a teaching experience. And for someone as young as you to understand that you're not claiming that, you're not owning the fact that someone decided to really, at an attempt to embarrass you, but what they really did was embarrass themselves. It was pitiful.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot to learn from you and a lot of other folks on TikTok just around, I don't know if the amount of hate that you're seeing in the comments right now, if that's typical on most people's videos, but I feel like because of where I engage and just the kind of community I come from, there's so much toxicity, so much fear, so much backlash and kind of hateful stuff. And for me, I just remember, like, this is the strangest thing, that I was on Facebook when I was 15 years old, and I was these kids in the comments and these people in the comments. Like, I literally can go back and look at my messages, and I have, sadly, and seen, like, I DM'd gay kids in my school and told them that homosexuality was sinful and of the devil. And so getting to step into the space and see this kind of reaction, for me, it's a reminder of where I was, and it's a reminder of the journey that I think, and I pray, most of these people will actually be on. Because, and I'm sure you remember this too, not sure how fear-based your theology used to be, but like, when you really believe that there's a God out there who's going to condemn you to hell for not believing the right thing, like, that's a scary existence. And it makes sense to me that these people are reacting the way that they are, not to justify it, but just as a reminder that, like, I don't mean to sound condescending, but their existence is really scary. And like, so that's, one of the biggest revelations on TikTok. It's not always been, I'm not always gracious, and there's many times they pull me into the worst sides of myself. But I do really, my hope is that through content like what we're creating, we're slowly whittling down that fear. And I always say, like, the foundation of my faith is perfect love casts out all fear. Like, if I believe anything, that's what I believe. And I hope that the love that we're ultimately calling people towards is combating their toxicity, right?
Well, and I think I think we're all responding to this unsettling of hierarchical structures that are no longer serving humanity. And the power structures do not have, people are realizing that the way these power structures are set up, there's no way that people who have always been historically oppressed are ever going to get so far up in that power structure. And people are just tired of it. People are weary. The breaking down of the middle class. I was just sharing on my live that I spoke with a congressional candidate, hopefully, if he can raise enough money. And it's so sad because this person has several master's degree and knows politics and really has his finger on the pulse of what needs to happen when it comes to elevating the true middle class of this country, which is just taking so much when it comes to not even be able to not put gas in the car, but just even being able to afford a house. And realizing that eventually this system is non-sustainable because that's the same people that constantly get bombarded with the demands of a hierarchical system that is set up for the white Christian male to be on top, white evangelical Christian male to be on top, when we're talking about what's happening with Christian nationalism. So it cannot sustain what's happening right now, and that tension is what's causing this increased fire in the belly of those that are entrenched in fear-based theology. And when you understand that, you can almost look past it, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be triggered sometimes, because you absolutely are. I
Totally.
mean,
Totally.
I get it as well. We're only human, right? We're
Yeah.
not Jesus-like, we're human. And
Totally.
even Jesus turned the tables over. That's what I said when I go,
Yeah.
damn it, even Jesus turned the tables over. We could
Totally.
get
Yeah.
angry.
Yeah. And there are certainly moments for that. And I think, yes, so many people on TikTok that are coming from traumatic religious backgrounds are looking for faith leaders to get angry in the same way that they're angry sometimes at these oppressive systems. So, one of the questions, as I kind of have watched your work over the past few years, other than backing off of TikTok for a little while and breathing and like recentering yourself, what do you do regularly to keep yourself grounded and sane and stable and not falling into cynicism and existential dread in this moment?
I'm a self-care hypocrite.
Yeah.
First of all, I'll admit that I am
Yeah.
a self-care hypocrite until something starts to feel like it's really off. And then I'm like, all right, I got to recalibrate here. But for me, some of the most powerful work that I do for my spiritual, I call it contemplative spiritual practices. And when I moved away from my evangelical heritage, which was very entrenched in prayers that felt more like make me something, so that I'm acceptable to be loved and acceptable to be worthy of salvation. So that focus was always off of the world and into what life was going to be in heaven, always working for that reward. I was the perfect good Christian, because I definitely connected the work I did here on earth with stars in the crown. That message had been indoctrinated in me from the time I was a little girl, and I lived it.
Yeah.
And moving away from that was very hard to move from, like the works of my hand not being related to my salvation and also my spirituality. So writing is my quote salvation. And I love when we can take a word and give it new meaning that actually is about, I do believe that our spirituality is more about how we show up in this world and how we elevate the human condition and leave the world a better place because we were in it, and get less focused about what happens, because that's where the dogma comes in. That's where a lot of the arguments come in. So what can we do here to stay focused? So my salvation now in this life is writing.
Yeah.
So so my contemplative spiritual practices became much more expansive once I deconstructed from that evangelical fear-based belief system. So writing is a big one. Journaling is a big one. I can fill a journal in no time, or other times I will start to write and all I'll do is doodle.
Yeah.
And there's something there that I'm processing, and I just let this spirit, this indwelling presence, lead me to what is it that I need. I have in what I consider my healers, my sages, and my wisdom keepers that are around me. I have a shaman. I have people who are gifted in different kinds of readings. So they will give me readings that I will use during whether you want to call it a moon cycle, like, oh my gosh, she's a heretic. And that's where I feel like that can make people feel uncomfortable, especially when you again come from this fear-based theology where everything that wasn't focused on prayer and what was considered valid ways of spiritual expression, you were led against. But if we are created beings and the universe is a created a part of our creation, and the divine or God is part of creation, then how can anything that we do that brings us into harmony with creation, how can it be a sin? So oftentimes I will use the moon cycle to do a meditation practice from the full moon to the new moon, or the new moon to the full moon, whatever it feels like I'm finishing in that system. I'm not worshiping the moon, but if I did, it would be nobody's business. Um, and so, those are the things that really speak to me. I will also do their way back. And again, I don't do this to appropriate. I don't share this very often, but it feels safe to share it with you. I do have Indigenous Native heritage way back there. So in my own personal practice, not to teach it, not to get out there and do a TikTok about it, but I will use some a dance that feels intuitive to me, that was given to me by one of my ancestors, that I'll do inside a personal practice, because movement can be just as sacred. So being open for different kinds of things that can help you, but even in this realm, I don't know if you've ever heard of, I'm going to get it wrong. It's called the Contemplative Institute, something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
the whole thing about the whole thought behind this institute was to help people understand that breath is sacred, movement is sacred. Anything that you do in life that creates a creative bond between you and this spiritual connection can be considered a sacred practice. So how does it ground you and prepare you for the work that you are doing?
Totally.
So it's a very long answer, but if I ever came out and said, well, I just meditate, I knew it. I
Yeah.
knew it. I
Yeah.
knew she was a heretic all along. Yeah, I am.
No. I'm with you. I'm with you. That's such a good answer to hear. Way back, maybe 5 years ago, way back, I read a book by Thomas More called A Religion of One's Own. And this will also trigger heresy bells for people. But it is kind of what you're saying. There's been a lot of critique over the years of people that kind of create their own spirituality. And yet, I think that all of us are such a compilation of different identities and ancestries and backgrounds and beliefs that each one of our spiritual practices should look like this diverse array of whatever's resonating with us at any particular moment. And like you, I have Scottish, Irish ancestry, and I 5 years ago went over and stood in stone circles and like had some direction from kind of pagan practitioners in that part of the world about like how my ancestors would have connected to the divine through nature and things like that. And yeah, I just think, again, back to that fear versus love dichotomy, so many people block themselves off from ways of connecting to the divine because they're afraid that by opening themselves up to anything other than a Christian practice, they're going to be disconnected from God. And as you said, my favorite quote from the Apostle Paul, and he was quoting a pagan philosopher, is, "In God we live and move and have our being." Like, there's nowhere we can go, nothing we can do that's not infused with the divine. And I think your answer is just a beautiful reminder that do whatever connects you to a sense of meaning and purpose, like do it, explore it. Don't be afraid.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly. And change it if it feels right to change it, because I do think that we can get stagnant with our spirituality by just putting it on autopilot and doing things that no longer enrich us, or we forget to try to move beyond our comfort zone.
Yeah.
And learning about others' cultures, not to appropriate it, always careful about that.
Yeah.
But to be inspired by it, because just like you said, especially if that's part of your heritage, what elements of that still speak to you? And just echoing what you said and what Paul said, I love that John Shelby Spong often quoted that as part of what he's moving towards. Yeah. So instead of just thinking about I'm an Episcopalian and I'm rigid in my thinking, no, I'm curious and I want to live in wonder, because the Bible inspires me to not keep Jesus in this box based on manuscripts that we know are flawed, based on manuscripts that we know aren't complete, that we know that had been manipulated, but move beyond that and say, well, what's the wonder and the mystery of Jesus? Who was this person? Because that's how I want to live and move and have my being, because that feels more expansive. and giving and loving than saying, I'm going to plant my feet here and I'm going to be not moving from this spot because this is as far as my spirituality can go. And I think that's where religion is being invited into a different dance.
Yeah.
That's the word that comes up. Invited to dance with the divine instead of being held on to this rigid theology. It just breaks my heart for how many people just want to plant their feet right there and say, I'm not moving any farther than this. And anybody who does is wrong.
Totally.
And I should say that if that serves you to plant your feet there, that's fine. But often what happens is that weaponizes their belief to thinking that no one who does what they do then is wrong.
Totally.
So, I think that again feels like the season that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Nice glasses there.
Thank you.
Someone's loving you.
Yeah. Well, one more thing on this, and then I have a follow-up question for you. But it just brought up kind of the guiding story for me and my spirituality since I was a kid is the story of the call of Abram from Genesis chapter 12. And what's so powerful about that story is we meet Abram, we know nothing about him. All it says is that God speaks to Abram and tells him to go into an unknown land that God will lead him to. And Abram has to leave behind his family, the land of his inheritance, all of his wealth, and begin walking on this unknown journey towards the promised land. But he doesn't know what that is or what that looks like or where that's at. And that is the metaphor for my spiritual life. It's that I've just tried to respond to what I understand to be the Spirit of God, calling me beyond the boundaries and borders of my rigid religion. I don't know where I'm going. I don't have an end goal. I don't think that's the point. And as I've gone, it's just trusting that the Spirit is with us, that as long as we're trusting and walking in love, we can't be led astray because the Spirit doesn't do that. And I think experiencing that freedom, that liberation, that to be curious has been the greatest spiritual gift for me. And it's why, again, I feel like it's so important that we keep showing up in these spaces for all the people that are locked in by fear and are responding out of fear. I think what they're actually responding to is, I don't know if I want to say it this way, but we'll go ahead and do it, an inner sense of almost jealousy. There's a jealousy when you see somebody who's free and able to explore and able to be curious, and you don't feel like you can. And so I hope that our freedom and the ability to step out and follow the wild winds of the Spirit can inspire people to do the same,
Well, and I'm going to misquote her, but resentment isn't part of the anger family. It's part of the envy family. And a lot of times that's also a Brene Brown teaching that's such an important point that you're making. But I also love that you brought Abram here, because Abram, as he journeys through this, his life changes, his name changes, and he continues to move and evolve. And it's not about to a place of perfection, but it's a place of a willingness to continue to search on,
Totally.
a willingness to be tested, even when it's scary, a willingness to just stay on the path. There's so much metaphor for life when we start to look at those stories as something to guide our spiritual growth as we grow, as we move through our humanity.
Totally. And what I love about the Abraham story is that it is the foundation of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. At the core of all of these major religions, many of which are obviously at least iterations of them are rooted in fear. At the core is this story and this metaphor of freedom and liberation and stepping beyond boundaries. And so I hope our traditions can harken back to that foundational metaphor and find that liberation.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So one thing I hear a lot of people ask, and it's kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. I get questions probably every day of people saying, I left my traditional Christian spirituality and I no longer feel like I can connect with God. And what am I supposed to do now? When I hear that question, I hear, I no longer connect with God in the same way that I once did, or it doesn't feel the same as it once did. I wonder how you would direct somebody who's coming from a background where they might have had a very visceral, almost ecstatic evangelical experience of God, high emotion, high energy, and they're now on this deconstruction path. And contemplation, I agree with you. I think that's the core of every great spiritual tradition, has this deep root of meditation, contemplation, mindfulness. But a lot of people really struggle to get there and struggle to connect with the divine in that space. How do you speak to the people that are wrestling with, I can't feel God anymore the way that I used to know God, and I don't know what's next?
Well, I have to be careful when I want to smile with delight when
Yeah,
someone says either I don't know who or what God is, I don't know how to pray, I don't know what to believe anymore,
yeah,
because that's the first sign that there's a peeling away and there's an opportunity for growth, but it doesn't feel that way, especially when you're coming from that high control, high demand religion that basically forced the beliefs on you. And it was very much in duality. You believe this, or if you don't, then you're excommunicated or you're kicked out. You're not part of the fold. You had a weak faith, a doubter's mind. I mean, it was very much you would be personally ostracized or attacked because you had to keep the fold tight. You had to keep that core loyal to that theology, or you risked the structure. And the whole thing is about perpetuation of the institution. But someone who's starting to step away from that to say, this is no longer resonating with me. I'm seeing the problems with this belief, but I don't want to give up on everything. I always call that you're standing at this spiritual wilderness. Again, these are my words. It doesn't mean this is for everybody, but this is what makes sense for me because I could feel it myself. And sometimes looking at that wilderness where you don't know where you're going and you don't have a roadmap. And for years, we've been told how to be spiritual by how we worship, what we believe. And now you have nobody doing that for you, but yet you feel yourself turning away from your religious heritage. Sometimes that's so scary that they're just going to plop right back in the pew. And
yeah,
it's easier to fake it there than to take a risk of being here. So the first thing I tell them is to trust the journey. Trust this inner calling or knowing that's pulling them away, because if it feels like it's real and it's of spirit, then and it feels as solid and valid as what you feel in it when you're sitting in the pews, then why not trust the journey? Why not see where it's going to take you? The worst thing that's going to happen is that you can spiral back to where you were, but why not finish it? Why not see it through? Why not see where it's going to take you? And then I would tell them that that's where some of this fear is coming from, is because now it's almost like you're reclaiming parts of your spirituality that weren't really yours to give away in the first place. Oftentimes we give so much of that over to this obedience, submission, that is part of that high demand, high control religion, that it takes elements of your spiritual control away from you. So to reclaim that makes you feel a little wobbly, because it's like, well, what am I going to do with it? I don't know how do I pray to this God that I'm not sure I believe in anymore, in the way this anthropomorphized, angry God that is waiting for me to mess up. So, I mean, I really, that fear base was so entrenched in me that as late as 92, when I went to the first church where I was hearing a woman preach, which is ironic now, I really thought it was 85 degrees and sunny. And I thought, I'm going to go out and get struck by lightning. This is so not the way it is, because that's how strong that indoctrination is. And even, Brandan, you'll find this interesting, when John Shelby Spong, Bishop John Shelby Spong, for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, he came to our town to speak. And I had read this article, and I'm like, oh, I got to go see this person. Now, I am entrenched in evangelical history. So I always say that, I mean, evangelical church, I always say I was deconstructing long before I was recognizing that I was. I'm like, I'm going to go see this person. But I had to wait till he started, and I snuck in the back and planted myself, making sure, had a hat on, me and my stepdaughter sitting there like this, hoping nobody recognized us, and both of us terrified that we were going to leave that place. And we're talking 12 years ago. We were going to leave that place and get hit by a bus because we were being apostates at that point for defying and being in a church outside of the evangelical faith and listening to this devil-like person talk about basically another way to look at ancient scripture, but yet still have a sacred path. I still understand. I mean, it was all, I couldn't stay away from it, but but I also was terrified by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, when I had the first book I got of his was Christianity Must Change or Die. And I hid it. I hid it in papers because I didn't want anybody to see I was reading it. And for the longest time, I couldn't say it. Even here on TikTok, I was afraid to say it at first because to say that sounded so sacrilegious. But it really is true. And for the sake of I don't want to see Christianity die, but for the sake in its entirety, it is at risk right now, even for those who are in progressive thought and faith as you, because the largest, not the largest, that's totally wrong. The loudest, threatening ones are the ones that are compromising our Christian, our democracy right now. So they're like if you ask somebody outside of America, that's what they think of Americanized Christianity, which is totally not true. They're not even the majority. But so that's a problem. And I've gone way off on your question, answering your question. So then, you know, asking them to dive into the spiritual wilderness where basically you say, good luck. I'll see you on the other side of that. But here are some things that helped me. Here's some people that I trusted. Here's some people that you need to, that you can read, some teachers. And TikTok has helped that so much with these deconstructing communities, these progressive thought communities, different kinds of spiritual communities and people who are holding on to their faith and still deconstructing. That helps so much. I did not have that resource. It would have been a totally game changer for me if I had. But the one thing I always say is don't not deconstruct, because the angry white male bitter person, and they're here on TikTok too, who thinks they've deconstructed, are doing more damage than they know. Because you're holding on to some of those indoctrinated beliefs. And I get in arguments with them. Sometimes it's just ridiculous. One time I got in an argument with an atheist where I said being gay is not a sin. And he's like, well, I'm an atheist and I don't really care, but it is a sin. I just need you to know that. But you're an atheist. Why are you in this fight? You have no investment in this at all. Why are you fighting with me about this? Well, it doesn't matter about that. I'm going to tell you it's a sin. But you're an atheist. And holding on to that, and not only to the point where he didn't understand that he was expressing a bigoted belief because of this indoctrination that he should let go of. And finally, he just blocked me. So he's out there even angrier now that, you know, I'm sure that a woman also challenged him in that way. So don't not deconstruct. Do something to take a look at your indoctrinated beliefs and how they are affecting you. I said the first time I left church, I was lonely and I was scared, and I believed I was going to hell. I believed it. I believed I was going to hell because even though I was suffocating in church and I knew I could no longer stay there, I still had that indoctrinated belief in a literal hell. And thought, well, I know this is wrong, but I got to take a risk. I can't live like this anymore. I'm going crazy. And I was starting to understand what spiritual gaslighting was and stuff. I'm like, well, this is what it is. But hey, I'm going to hell, but I'm just going to see what this is. Thank God I deconstructed from those beliefs to understand that I'm more myself and I am more connected to the divine here in this space than I ever was entrenched in that fear-based theology. So I say to recap all of that is to trust those questions. Don't be afraid to ask them that come up to say, I don't know how to pray. I don't know what God I believe in. I don't even know if I believe. trust that you are being invited into the mystery of the divine that will actually move you closer. And if that means that you need to move away from your spiritual community, even if it's for a season, do that. It doesn't mean you won't come back, or you will find one that serves your spirituality better, which I would say is 9 times out of 10 what ends up happening, because most people are deconstructing from a high control, high demand religion that really messed them up in some way. And they're starting to understand what spiritual abuse is, what gaslighting is. And then the other thing I always say is don't not deconstruct.
Yeah.
Please look at those indoctrinated beliefs, because more than likely there's biases and prejudices in there that where we hold on to racist, sexist, even for women who internalize the misogyny, and you don't realize how much limited beliefs you are holding on to about yourself and the world around you until you actually start doing the deconstructing. And then, for some people, they never stop. I've never stopped deconstructing. It's actually part of my spiritual practice to continue to read wisdom keepers and to see people and even spend time. I take notes, Brandon, when I see your videos, honey. I take notes. I didn't have you in my spiritual circle as in my church experiences. So you are a gift in that way. And I don't think you ever stop deconstructing. And as long as we see that, and we see that I think you kind of know that you're coming to a place of healing when you can be in this place and say, you're churched, I'm not, I don't necessarily believe everything you do. And I know you don't believe, but that is okay.
Yeah.
We see each other and connect each other with our heart and soul, and we understand that that's a better place for humanity, and even for spirituality, and even for Christianity, because I call myself an unchurched, non-conforming Christian, because I'm not giving up the title of Christian. I did the work.
Yeah.
There's nobody out there qualified to take it away from me.
Totally.
And so for the longest time, I wouldn't call myself a Christian. And finally, I'm like, no, I'm not giving that up because of who I was.
Yeah.
And because of my religious heritage, because of Christianity, I'm a better person today. So I'm not giving that title up.
I love that. There's so much that was so good there. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yes. Yes and amen. I think the big thing I just want to come back to and repeat is curiosity is the posture of spiritual growth. And I've been influenced by so many writers like...
I'm writing that down.
Yeah. Well, Ken Wilber and Robert Fowler and all of these people that have done kind of the scientific work of mapping out the stages of spiritual development, which obviously I don't think there's one particular map that we all go through, but there are general stages that humans do go through. And the further through the spiritual progression people go through, the less fear is around, and the more you're able to see that nobody... And this is the thing that last week I said on my debate that got everybody so angry, was that there might be absolute truth out there. There might be answers to all the big questions, but clearly nobody has unfettered access to that, because humans have been asking the same questions since the dawn of consciousness. And so adopting a posture of humility to say, let's be curious. Let's always, whatever beliefs we hold on to, and whenever we find ourselves getting certain about anything, that's an invitation to listen to other voices and to bring in those who are skeptical of our own beliefs. And learning and that curiosity is what helps us continually unfold and evolve. And so my spiritual transformation has been, again, once the fear-based theology is gone, once I stop believing in a God who is watching me and watching my beliefs and waiting to give me a theological test at the other end of my journey on the earth, once I got rid of that, I was able to admit, I don't know really anything. And I don't think we're supposed to know all these answers, but I do think wonder, curiosity, openness, that's the posture that every great mystic, every great spiritual wisdom teacher that I've found has adopted. And that has led them to great sense of connection to the divine and great purpose and great meaning in life. And so I think you embody that so well. I think the invitation to people to continually deconstruct and to not believe that deconstruction is a one-time process that you go through. That's so important for people to hear. And I'm really grateful you brought that up.
It is. And I love the fact that the bridge that we meet on is that curiosity and wonder. I don't know how many times a week I say that.
Yeah.
And people are wanting something more tangible when in reality, it's the mystery of the wonder.
Totally.
If we would just release the need to know, because I don't think that's what humanity's, at least at this stage of our evolving, it really is meant to understand. But if we can see the Bible as this progressive story that they were telling and said, well, here's where we are now, and here's how we understand the divine, but we just keep moving through that. It doesn't change the fact that we can have faith, and that there's parts of the Bible that we can still anchor our belief system in to say, this resonates with me so deeply that I want to hold on to the sacredness of Jesus.
Yeah.
That's why we Christians hold on to our identity no matter what path it takes us on.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's hokey, but an old evangelical megachurch pastor said a quote way back in the day. I don't remember who it was, and it was probably something deeply problematic. But the message was that, and I don't even remember how many chapters are in the book of Acts, but that we are living that next chapter of the book of Acts, that we're part of the ongoing story of this scripture tradition that we've inherited. And what a beautiful invitation to believe what Jesus said, which is that when I leave you, I will send you the Spirit who will continue to lead you into all of the truth. The message there, we don't have all of the truth. All of the truth isn't contained in Scripture. All of the truth didn't end when Constantine made Christianity the religion of the empire and the canon was finished. The Spirit continues to speak to us, and we're continually living that story of the Scripture, of our tradition, if you're Christian and you claim that tradition. And I think that's the invitation I try to remind myself of when I engage in a Christian context.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I have a 4:00 that going to have to jump off for,
Totally.
But this has been wonderful. I want you to come over to my place.
Yeah, totally. I really appreciate you making time to chat. Folks in the comments have been asking, is this recorded? The answer is yes, and I will repost clips of this. So I really appreciate you being here, and I'm so grateful for your light and the work that you're bringing here on TikTok.
Oh, thank you, and you likewise, my dear. And we will be in touch, and we'll talk soon. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see
Bye.
you.